Welcome back to the McCoy Leadership Podcast, elevating your impact through valuable insights and conversations about leadership. Welcome back to the McCoy Leadership Podcast. Today we have Joel Goldberg with us, which you might have heard him on the airwaves. He's spent a good bit of time in sports broadcasting. And I did notice, I was reading, Joel, I was reading your bio, and it said back in the 1990s you were sending out tapes. And so you're going to have to probably explain to half of our audience what a tape is because they have no idea. But Joel, welcome. Thank you so much for spending some time with us here this morning. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey?
Well, it's great to be with you, Amos. And yes, just replace the word tapes with reel or link. And that would be it for all of us older people that remember what an actual tape is. I've been in TV for 30 years. Gosh, it's 31 years. October 1994 was when I broke in. And so by day, or really by night most of the time, I'm a baseball broadcaster for the last 18 seasons with the Kansas City Royals. I host every one of our pregame shows and postgame shows on TV, do all the in-game reports, the start of the game interviews, travel with the team all over the country, plus to Toronto. So that's what I've done the last 18 years, 30 overall in broadcasting. And I'm on for 6 months, I'm off for 6 months, which I hear a lot of people say, well, that sounds like a great deal. In the end, it all averages out to be the same. But you're working 6 to 7 days a month and traveling for 6 months, and then the other 6 months you're off. And it took me until about 8-9 years ago to figure out what to do with that other time. And I stumbled into starting a speaking business because I understood that the lessons learned every day in baseball, which is less about how to hit a home run or, how to throw a curveball, and much more about bringing the right people together and teamwork and leadership and culture and everything that every company is interested in. And so I started a business there that led to a podcast and led to books and on and on and on, and who knows where else. So that's the journey. It's really the second part of my journey while still living the other piece, which was the dream, and understanding that all these lessons in baseball, even for people that could care less, that don't like baseball one bit or have never watched a baseball game in their lives overseas, that there are lessons learned every day in baseball that can help people with what they're doing in their work. And so that's become a major passion of mine. So
wait a minute. You mean these Major League Baseball teams, like behind the scenes, they actually work and practice and have, leadership issues? I thought they were just all, amazingly talented and they just showed up to play a game together and they never did anything else.
Yeah. What's crazy about that, though, Amos, is that the modern day ball player is very much wired like any of the Gen Z guests or listeners that you have, because they are. So they are not wired in the same way as the ball players that I first started covering back in the 90s and 2000s, when, yes, I was sending out resume tapes instead of now a YouTube link or whatever it might be. I haven't sent out a resume tape in years. I love where I'm at, but I think that they're just like anybody else. They've grown up with all the technology. They expect to have the technology at their fingertips. It drives me nuts when some of the older generation will say they've got too much information. It's paralysis by analysis. It's all this type of stuff. Back when we played, it was just see ball, hit ball. Well, guess what? They've got technology and measurements for everything right now. And does some of that take away from some of the ability sometimes to think? Yeah, it's sort of like ChatGPT or AI. You still need to be able to think for yourself, and the best ones do. But the best ones also understand that they've got technology and the ability to perfect their game at a higher level than those in the past, which might be why they're better than those in the past, because they've got more resources. But also the other thing too, and I'm laughing at what you're saying, and I know it was all tongue in cheek, I thought they'd just show up and play, is that the modern day ball player, like most younger people in this country and in this world, are open to meditation, to mindfulness, to being present, to separating their job from their personal. I mean, most of the guys now take their wives and their kids on a road trip. In the past, it would have been scoffed at. Wait a minute, we're here for business. No, now it's, It's that balance, right? It's work life. It's bringing your family. It's not treating your job like it's the only thing in this world. What we see in baseball, what I see in baseball locker rooms, on the team planes, wherever I go with them, is very representative of what we're seeing in any other office place.
That's interesting. And I can't help but to think about poor Babe Ruth. Man, if he had to take his family with him and, all that, it would have cut down on some of his other activities. But,
and by the way, Amos, there aren't as many activities anymore because of social media. Yes. Guys understand that when they go out to a bar, which should not be a big issue at all, and they grab a beer and someone takes a picture and puts it on social media, not that they're doing anything illegal, but you better make sure that it doesn't look a little bit bad, right? I mean, if there happen to be a couple of women standing nearby, even if nothing is happening, the perception might be that you're out there doing things you shouldn't be doing or whatever it might be. So Babe Ruth would really hate this because guys don't even go out that much anymore. And when they do, they go out in big groups to dinner. It's just a different world.
So one of the lessons that I often teach to my clients, or if I'm teaching a class that comes directly from, in my mind, from baseball, but really any sport, is I always ask people, if I'm doing a sales training, which I have one coming up next week, and I ask, how many of you know a professional sports player that doesn't practice? And, they start to think about it. Even the best sports players continue to practice. And so what I'm just trying to relay is in life, if you want to be good at something, you got to practice.
Yeah.
I'm going backwards. I'm sorry. So I, in a past life, participated with an apprenticeship program. I was actually their CEO for a good many years. And this past year is one of the last things that I did with them. I participated in the interview process for all the incoming apprentices. And one of my standard questions always is, are you comfortable knowing that you're going to work every day? You're going to come to class 2 nights a week. 2 nights a week, you're going to have homework to do in the evening. So what I'm trying to tell you is you're not going to have much time for anything else other than working and learning. Are you okay with that? And I had several students this year, ranging in age 18 to 22, that said, yeah, I'm good with that because all of my social activity is done right here on my phone. And it hit me, that this next generation, I mean, they actually are replacing physical, one-on-one time or group time with what's on the phone. And you're saying the same thing, that you're kind of seeing that same thing happening. So that's kind of fascinating to me. And for those that want to take that step and become a leader, how do you think that affects them? Do they eventually have to learn those skills, or are they just naturally the only ones that are good at communicating?
I think they've got to learn those skills, and I don't think those skills are that difficult to learn. And what I tell people all the time, and it's not just the youngest of people emerging in the workforce right now. It's not just those students that you're talking about. I mean, if you think about even my age group, but certainly think about millennials. Just think about anyone post-pandemic and the amount of time that we were given permission to not meet face-to-face, to be able to hide behind a camera. And by the way, that works too. I mean, if it didn't work, we wouldn't be doing this podcast as easily. There wouldn't be as many of us like you and me that would do this. When I started my podcast in 2017, beginning of 2018, I was doing them all around Kansas City, and I did everyone face to face, in part because it gave me a chance to sit next to or across from a CEO and maybe have an hour of their time. And then I came to realize that it's a lot easier to do it this way. But just to, pull back the curtain a little bit, Amos and I talked for about 10 minutes before we came on. It was just sort of a get to know you, right? It was just a little bit of it. So that was a little bit of what I think you and I would do if we were sitting face to face for coffee. A lot of people forget that. Think about how many podcasts they have you on. You've never met them. You start, you go, it's fine, but there's no real connection. That's what we're missing in this world. There still is a way to do the connection via the camera. But I think that the ultimate leaders and the people that are going to rise above the competition are going to be the ones that know how to either do the face-to-face or make the virtual feel like face-to-face. It's a skill that we're losing, just like I said with AI, which, by the way, I am as all in on AI and ChatGPT and all of that. I'm for anything that helps me compress time, that makes me better at what I'm doing. What I'm not for is anything that enables my brain to stop thinking, for that atrophy to set in. And of course, that there's the temptation of that every single day. So if we all have, here's the biggest question that I love to ask my audiences, and we'll get back to the resume tape, if you will. When I broke into television, Amos, I got out of college, University of Wisconsin, in 1994. And so if you want to do the math, I'm 53 years old. But I started applying for TV jobs. Now, I know this is shocking to a lot of people. There wasn't much internet yet. It was just kind of new. Email was something my senior year of college that if you wanted to use, you had to go to the college library to log into a computer. Okay, so you didn't have what we have now, of course. You didn't have YouTube. You didn't have any of these things. And I don't remember what it cost, but I think I signed up for some number that you called in from your landline, an 800 number that you paid like $50 a month for, $25 a month for, whatever it was. It seemed like a lot for a kid just graduating college. And you'd punch in your personal code, and it would list any new job opening on TV in the country for that day. And, you'd look for a certain market size. I wasn't trying to get to my hometown of Chicago or anything like that straight out of school. And so smaller markets. And they'd give you the contact information of the person and the address, and you'd send it in. And I did that 25 times. And 25 with the actual tape. It was a physical tape with all of my best stuff on it, which wasn't very good at the time, but it was what I had. And I got a rejection letter in the mail back every single time. 0 for 25. And, I thought, boy, maybe this is the wrong profession. It's my dream. I want to be on TV, but maybe I need to go back to the local restaurant and just work there. And something sparked me. And this is the relationship side of sales. You're much more the sales expert than me. But I know that there's relationship involved in most sales at some level, right? And I started picking up the phone, which nowadays I know people don't want to pick up the phone. This is not a lecture of pick up the phone, because you know what? I don't like to talk too much on the phone anymore either. But even an email or a text message or just something beyond a LinkedIn blast that everybody else is getting. Well, I picked up the phone. I would ask for the news director. And I would say, hey, my name is Joel Goldberg. I just graduated from the University of Wisconsin. And I'm sure I was reading off a script at that point. I was nervous. I understand that you don't have any openings right now, which I came to realize later was a nice disarming piece. I'm not asking you for a job. I'm not asking you to say once again, no, I don't have anything. I understand you don't have anything. But I'm passing through town next week. If I were to drop in on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, would you be available for me to hand deliver a tape and introduce myself? I was never going to any of those towns. Terre Haute, Indiana, Rochester, Minnesota, Rochester, New York, Mason City, Iowa, all these, places that had TV stations. And every single one of those people said yes, except for one. The one that said no said he was too busy, but I already was stopping at another TV station in that town, so I just stopped in and dropped it off. And I suddenly built a relationship with 20-something people around the country, and I was the first call that they got every single time. And that's what got me into TV. Now, it's really easy to say, well, we don't need to do that anymore. We've got LinkedIn. We could just send a message that way in 2 seconds. Sure you do. So does everybody else. So the question I love to ask everybody is, what makes you different? And I think everything is a long way of me getting back to what you were talking about with all of this, that the ability to build these relationships, to be able to be face-to-face or virtual, but the ability to talk and listen and connect with people is still the difference maker. And I think that that's what will lead to the ultimate leaders, and that's what will lead to the people that are most successful. Do you have to have it? Not necessarily, but if you do have it, at least some of it, and you're younger, you set yourself apart from everybody else. That's my belief.
And I think that is so important for our listeners. I mean, just to draw that out and kind of summarize it. One, there is a difference between communicating and connecting. What you described was you were communicating, you were sending a correspondence with a tape, and they watch that tape. They have no idea who you are. They have no connection to you. They're just seeing data or information. And the biggest thing about that is, from a communication standpoint, we know today that 90% of what somebody receives out of what you say, if you're in person, is your tone, your body language. It's not what you said, it's those other things. So when you go to email, you remove tone and body language, and it's up to that person to decide. So if they're in a bad mood, you're probably in a bad mood. At least if you do a phone call, you can still have tone. But the best example of that, I read an article during the pandemic about a real estate agent, and he got really worried that he had no way to get in contact with his people because he legally couldn't get in contact or face-to-face with them. And how he had done his entire business was he would just call past clients and say, hey, let's go have a cup of coffee and talk to them. And then maybe he'd end up upsizing them to a bigger house and selling their house. So he started sending coffee to his clients with an invite for a Zoom meeting. And so he would send them a cup of coffee, with, now I can't think of it, the food delivery system. And so it worked because he was still making that connection. And so I actually read the article, and I thought, at the time I had a board of directors, and I thought, how do I engage my board of directors? We used to have our board meeting with breakfast. So I went out and bought camping meals that you just, boil water and add water to. And I sent every one of my board members a box with instructions to do not open this until the morning of the meeting. And then they opened it, and there was instructions inside to get their breakfast ready. So we all sat and had breakfast and talked before we started the board meeting. And you wouldn't have believed the difference that made for that particular board meeting, because we hadn't been able to interact since they shut everything down due to COVID. So I love your story. And I think another question out of that, oftentimes people see you today on television and they just assume that, hey, man, he's just amazing. And, he's always been amazing. And you touched on or touched a piece on that maybe the first stuff you sent out wasn't your best, and you've continued to grow and get better. So, I guess the question is, were you just handed a job one day because you had a great voice and you looked amazing, or did you have to work at it? And what would be your advice to anybody anywhere that's starting a new endeavor? What would be your advice to them from what you've learned through your experience?
Well, this one's easy to say. It can be a little tougher to do just because it takes a little discipline, but it's not a painful thing. Well, maybe it can be a little bit. Is you just got to go do it. Like everything early on is about the reps. Maybe it always is, but let me go to the end, or at least where I'm at now, and then I'll go backwards. I'm asked on a semi-regular basis by someone I know or someone I don't know, a baseball fan, that'll say something like, I have a different job, so it leads to a lot of people being curious about it, which is cool. But I also like to explain to people that this job really is no different than anybody else's. It just happens to be in front of a camera. I'm a storyteller, so are most of us. I'm selling something, whether it be our show, the game, personalities. It's no different than anything else. It just happens to be in front of a camera with a lot of people watching. And so I'll get the question, on a semi-regular basis, do you get nervous? And there's no right or wrong answer to that. Like, I hate when people say, well, if you don't get nervous, you're not human. I don't get nervous, but I've also done thousands and thousands and thousands of shows and tens of thousands of interviews and, all live television with very little safety net. And I wasn't very good when I started. And you know what? There are some days I might not be good now either. But I know what that looks like. I know how to battle through it. There's nothing that is going to surprise me or nothing that is going to freak me out. And that only happens because of doing it over and over and over again. And I think, going back to the beginning, that what I would tell myself, or anybody listening, by the way, and this is a message that is well beyond television, media, journalism, or anything like that. It would apply to someone thinking about writing a book. It would apply to someone thinking about starting a podcast. It would apply to someone thinking about pursuing a job. And how often do we say to ourselves, yeah, no, at some point I want to do that. Translation, I want to wait until everything is exactly right and perfect. It's never going to be exactly right and perfect. And the only way that you get closer to getting to that point is to taking the steps, which does include failure, but it's the reps. The reps harden you. You develop calluses for this. And the reason why I'm not nervous anymore, the reason why I relish the chaos, I'm fine without it, by the way, too, but the reason why my heart rate doesn't go up during the chaos of live television is because I've been there and done it, and I've failed in every single way. And so that is, and I think the younger generation gets this concept. That's just being present in the moment. That's living the moment and living the journey. And we all get so wrapped up in the end result. And I don't know that you ever get an end result, but you get closer to it by just trying and doing these things. Here's a great way to explain the exact same concept, Amos. How many people do you know that say some version of, and they may not be serious, or they might, where one day I want to write a book. I've got so much stuff on fill in the blank. One day I'm going to write a book. And some of it's just a form of expression. I've seen so much one day. No, you're not. And they're not even interested in it. Other people genuinely are interested in doing it, but they're never going to do it. And when having written 2 books myself now, what I tell people, as if I'm suddenly some kind of expert, what I tell people is, if you really are considering writing a book, whether it's next year, 10 years, 20 years, anytime a thought pops into your head or something, you stumble into some kind of occurrence, a story, or whatever it is that you think could be in the book, whether it is or not, pull out your phone and get out the notes page and just voice record a thought. Doesn't need to be the right sentence. It doesn't need to be anything other than making sure you are logging a thought, an idea, an occurrence. And in time, you start to build all those up. So when it comes to start that book, you're not looking and saying, oh my gosh, how do I start? No, you've already been doing the work. That's the reps. That's all of this that I'm talking about, is that you have to keep doing it over and over and over again. And to the point you made, a little bit earlier too, yes, these baseball players don't just show up and play. It's not that easy. And I think as a speaker, I would love for 5 days a week, maybe 4 days a week. I'd love to be on stage 4 days a week. That's the game for me. That's the fun stuff. But probably 90% of my time spent in the off season and even during the season is the practice. Yep. It's the networking. It's the calls. It's the emails. It's the development of content. That's the practice, and that's what all of us need. But you don't get to where you want to go without doing all those things.
No, well, you made me think of something I heard recently. John Maxwell, which has written 100 and some books. People often ask him, hey, I'm thinking about writing a book. What's your suggestion? And he said, well, my suggestion is start with a word and then a sentence and then a paragraph.
That's it.
And then go from there. Excuse me. And I think those reps, because even podcasting, go back and listen to my first podcast and you'll understand, you continually get better the more reps you do. I don't know how many we've done so far, but today I feel very comfortable to get into a podcast and get going. You mentioned our connection ahead of time. I can't do an interview unless we've talked for a few minutes ahead of time because I don't know who you are until we've had that moment. So thinking about that, you have interviewed hundreds of sports folks. And I've watched some of your interviews and I love how it seems like when you're doing the interview, you have a connection with them. So what is your secret? Not that there necessarily is a secret, but how do you make that happen?
Maybe this is different if you're in a spot of, I'll just use, this might not resonate with anyone either, but like a 60 minutes type of interview, which by the way, isn't always hard hitting, but whatever it might be. If you are in a spot where you're trying to do some kind of gotcha, well, then, they're going to be on the defensive.
Yep.
By the way, I'm not saying you're never allowed to ask tough questions or bring up tough subjects or whatever it might be. But my, at least, philosophy and belief in the way I go about things is that if the person I'm interviewing understands that I have their best interests, then, or if they feel safe, and by the way, that safety piece could apply to anything. If the person you're talking to, if the person you're asking for business, if the person you're interviewing, if they feel safe, they're more likely to listen, to open up, whatever it might be. In the case of me, I want to put whoever I'm interviewing in the most comfortable place to be themselves. And for me, that means trying to get them away from all the cliches, which doesn't always work. There are certain athletes that we have that are going to only live in the cliches, and that's their method of surviving and making sure they don't ever say anything that. But the ones that I'm able to build trust with, I speak a lot about trust. It's my main topic, and everything that I do every day is meant to build trust. It's what you did with me in the first 10 minutes before we went on. Really, yes, you're trying to learn a little bit more about me, but I think also you're probably trying, and you said, this is the way I do things, this is my philosophy and all of that. But I'm not sharing any major secrets here. That's what I do with most of my guests as well, if I don't know them. So yes, it might feel selfish, like I'm trying to learn more about you, but really you're trying to put your guest at ease to say, hey, I know what I'm talking about, or you're going to be safe, or everything's going to be good. I'm not some whatever, you and I both bump into some people that you start a podcast with them and you say, yeah, maybe this one wasn't such a good idea, but it'll be okay. Right. And so that's all part of it. That's what I'm doing every single day at least with the players that I see on a regular basis. Do I need it every time? Not necessarily, but the further you go, the more they're willing to show their personality. And then you get to what you described before, Amos, of, I want my interviews to feel like a conversation over coffee. Everything I do on TV, I want to feel like it's me and whoever it is sitting for a beer or a cup of coffee or lunch, and everybody else gets to be that fly on the wall. When you get to that point, that's where, to me, you have the magic. And so is it going to work every time? No. We've got some guys that just aren't as talkative or are more protective. And so you keep trying to chip away at it slowly by slowly. And you understand that pushing their buttons in a way that gets answers and shows some personality is going to be different for each guy. Some are going to be harder. Some are going to be easier. Some are going to be more sensitive to this. Some aren't. And oh, by the way, we have about usually a third of our players that are speaking English as a second language, if they're willing to forego the translator, which is one of my goals. And by the way, if I was in their shoes, I'd take the translator. I'd be pretty scared. But I understand that a lot of our players from Venezuela, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Mexico, and beyond are going to be nervous. They might be able to hit a 100-mile-an-hour fastball without their heartbeat going too fast, but then they get in front of a television camera and have to speak a second language. So more than ever, it is my goal to make sure that I can put them at ease, and the more they feel at ease, the more they're going to open up to me. That to me is probably something I take more pride in, and I think is a skill with a lot of nuance that I never understood when I started. And by the way, something that I can continue to get better at every single day.
I like it. So you have had, all the way from working with TV executives at a smaller level, working with executives today from a speaking standpoint to bring you in to talk. You've worked with sports leaders. What are some commonalities between those standout leaders that you have encountered and had the opportunity to work with that you have seen?
I think one of the most common traits of any of the good leaders that I've been around on the field, in the dugout, in the boardroom, is positivity, energy givers, which, by the way, is not always the loudest person in the room. It might sometimes be the quietest person in the room. There are plenty of great examples that I have of guys that have led by example, that are highly respected, and their positive energy has to do with doing the work every single day, not complaining about it. And you could see it wherever I go, that people gravitate towards those folks. So I think that's one thing, positive energy givers. The second is I think, and this isn't necessarily in order, but just an accountability piece. Willing to hold yourself accountable, willing to hold others accountable, willing to treat everybody fairly, and no, we don't all have the same roles. But I have a great story of one of the star players for Kansas City back in 2016, and I remember a guy by the name of Eric Hosmer. He's since retired, but high dollar first baseman, one of those face of the franchise types. The all-American looks and the personality, and comfortable in front of every camera and every interview. He is the ultimate spokesman. And I remember a game, we were in Tampa or in St. Pete, Florida, and he gets thrown out at first base to end an inning, and they were losing and could have been a key play, and he might have been the run that won the game for them. And I just remember thinking, as I do as the game is going on, that, boy, if they lose, that becomes our number one story right there. They ended up coming back to win, so it ended up not becoming a story. And he was still asked about it after the game on camera, not by me. I was hosting our post-game show, but we ran the interview, and he says something along the lines of, somebody asked him about it, and he said, I messed up. I could have really hurt my team there, but I'm glad they bailed me out and we won so I could sleep a little better tonight. And it was just a bad mistake on my part. And that was that. Good answer. Appreciate the accountability. Well, later that night, I'm out for a drink. I knew his family pretty well, and his family was in town. And so I went out at the hotel with him and his parents and brother and uncle and another teammate. And somebody asks him what happened on that play, which I was not going to do that. I was off the clock, and I was really just there as a guest. And which, oh, by the way, is not a bad way to build relationships with the star player of the team when their parents invite you to come out for a drink. And so somebody asks him, and he says, I dove back in, he picked me off, and as I'm standing up, the first base coach says to me, man, I completely messed up the read on that one. I gave you the wrong information. I thought I had, because when you're reading a pitcher, for those that don't follow baseball, maybe if you watch poker, you're looking for a little tell, you're looking for a little sign from the pitcher that maybe no one's uncovered that can tell you whether he's going to throw home or throw to first base. And that way, if you see he's throwing home, you can start to run to second base and steal easier. Well, he had the wrong idea, and he had him too far off first base, saw the wrong thing, and the first base coach had messed it up. And no one ever knew it publicly. And so now imagine if the next day in the articles or the interviews, that first base coach, maybe he's looking and he sees what happened on that play. Oh, I just messed it up. His name was never mentioned. All that player had to do was say, I don't know, talk to the first base coach. I was just following orders.
Yep.
Now imagine what that looks like in terms of a leader, in terms of the star of the team saying, you know what, I'll protect my guy.
Yep.
And now imagine all of the players that aren't making as much money as him. You think about a really high-paid player being a prima donna. I've seen plenty of high-paid, multi-millions, hundreds of millions of dollar guys that have said, wasn't me, talk to him. And that festers. That is the worst kind of leadership, right? But now you got your star player that's willing to say, not only am I willing to admit when I'm wrong, I'm willing to admit that I'm wrong when somebody else does it too. So to me, those are a couple of the really big characteristics, and they transcend culture, generations, backgrounds. Because when even in language barriers, when you see a guy that is willing to take that for you, you'll take it for him too.
I think it's back to what you said earlier, trust. Knowing that you're there as a team, it's about a team. And I'll never forget a valuable lesson I learned when I was a second shift supervisor early in my career. In the night shift, we had a problem. We damaged something, and I didn't let a note explaining what had happened. And it wasn't nobody did anything wrong. It was just through the process, this item got damaged. And the next day when we came in, the overall site manager had pulled us all in, and he just started reaming everybody out. And all my guys were looking at me, and I just stopped. I said, hold on, time out. I said, here's what happened. I should have left a note. It's on me. And, the manager then shut up, and, I talked to him later, explained what had happened, and everything was fine. But my guys turned around, and that was when I started to build trust with them. And for me, that was a turning moment where I realized what it looked like to start to build trust. And I think that's part of what you're describing there. Well, I want to make sure we do have time here. You have two great books. Tell us a little bit about those, and where can folks find them?
So the easiest way is Amazon. If you're passing through the Kansas City bookstore, they're both sitting there. That's always fun. I get text message from people coming in and out of town, taking a picture of my book. But Amazon nowadays is certainly the easiest way to do it. Both books have similar titles, and I'll just explain real quick. And they really came from the podcast. For those that are baseball fans, you'll know the term. For those that are not, I actually love to ask audiences this question. So small ball in baseball is the bunts, the sacrifices, the kind of the opposite of the home run. It's the manufacturing of the runs. In many ways, it's what Amos and I have been talking about this whole podcast. It's the secret sauce. It's the little things behind the scenes, right? We all want to hit the big home run. We all want the big sale. We all want the big moment, the purchase of the house. We celebrate all those type of things, the car. But how do you get there? What are the little things? And so, baseball terms talk about keeping the line moving, manufacturing runs. So a great example of small ball in baseball is guys on first base, there's nobody out, or that's a good example. And the next hitter comes up and he intentionally grounds out to first or second base. He's trying to hit to ground out to that side to advance the runner to the next base so that then the next batter can knock him in. And you don't get any credit for that at all. It's sacrifice. You don't even get for a sacrifice bunt or sacrifice fly. You don't get credit for an at bat, which means it doesn't lower your batting average. For this one, it lowers your numbers, which could in the long run affect your salary. But you're doing it for the team, and that is small ball. So when I started my podcast, Rounding the Bases, I decided, and I'm like you, I'm not a scripted guy. I want to know the story of the person, and then we'll have a conversation. But I always have 3 baseball-themed questions I ask every guest. What's the biggest home run you've hit in your career? What's the biggest swing and miss you've taken? And then the one I love audiences to think about, and I challenge your audience right now, what is small ball to you? What are the little things that add up to big results? And that was the question that was getting the most interesting answers. It was really meant to be a question about your culture, or, what makes your company or you as a person tick. What are the little things that nobody notices, the behind the scenes? And so from that, my first book came Small Ball, Big Results. And then the second book was Small Ball, Big Dreams. And really the first book is a bit of how to get there. And the second book is the grit and the resilience. But it's just all storytelling in and out of baseball. Everything from, baseball superstars to role players to interesting CEOs to startup entrepreneurs to musicians to some famous people and not so famous people. The second book, I had a testimonial from Bob Costas, who was one of my broadcast heroes growing up, and so there's a big testimonial on the back of the book. He was one of the biggest podcast guests I've had, and one of my heroes who's a great guy. And the foreword for the book was written by George Brett, Hall of Famer and one of the greatest third basemen of all time. And then just chock full of stories. And I'm a storyteller. And so I want people to be able to pick up these books, to be inspired by the stories in them, and to also understand that with the attention span that most of us have nowadays, me included, that there are 2 books that you can pick up and start any chapter anywhere in the book and receive some type of information and an interesting story. And really, you talked before, Amos, about starting and, those little things and writing and, whatever it might be. And then some of John Maxwell's words, I'm doing that every single day still, because when do we not bump into some kind of story that might inspire others at the grocery store, driving down the highway, whatever it might be. And so now I find myself doing the same thing, voice recording into my notes, but it might be something I write about that I send out in a newsletter or an email blast next week. And it might only be 1 paragraph or 2 paragraphs, just something to give people a little some type of inspiration. And maybe all those turn into a book down the road, or they turn into something else. So we could be working on this stuff every single day. And I don't know that I ever thought I'd write 2 books, but I have. And, you know, they work really well, and bringing them to speeches. And by the way, hearing from people that will never see me speak, that just enjoy it. So it's been a lot of fun.
That is awesome. And I have the first book, and the second book you have me sold on. I'm going to buy. I'm going away next week, and so I'm going to take that with me. That's what I'm going to read while I'm away. But I do think it is important to recognize, you just hit on it. You know, we bump into so many things in story. Everybody does. I don't care who you are. You bump into things that might inspire somebody. And part of being a storyteller is finding those things. But even if you're not necessarily a storyteller, so many people say, well, it's a great story, but I don't know who to give it to, or I don't know who to tell it to. Put it out there. You know, even this podcast, I've always said, if one person gets one thing from Joel Goldberg, I had a successful day. That's all that matters to me. One person, because that's one person that's better than they were before they listened to the podcast. So also, if people are listening and thinking, man, I got to get Joel into my company to talk at my retreat or at my association, where do they get a hold of you?
Yeah. And that, if you're interested, please reach out, because I'd love to have a conversation. And by the way, I mean, and I don't know, Amos could correct me on this in terms of my my sales abilities, but for me, I want to have the conversation and see if there's alignment, if it makes sense, and to learn more before I say, hey, hire me. I mean, who am I to say hire me if I don't even know what your needs are? But the best way to reach me is through my website, and all the information is there, joelgoldbergmedia.com. And so I'd love to hear from anyone. But just real quick to put a bow on what you were talking about, and these, yes, if one person hears it, then we made an impact. That goes for me too, as your guest. And by the way, I don't know what that impact is. I'm just going to trust that someone will hear something at some point during this podcast. I hope it's more than just one. Doesn't matter though. And by the way, if nobody does, there's still something to get out of this. Maybe you and I develop a connection out of this. Maybe I learned something from you. Maybe you learned something from me. There's always something, and you don't have to be on TV to do this. And so we have so many experiences in our lives that affect us.
Yep.
That affect the way we go about our everyday life. Something as simple as, oh, my daughter said this to me. Hey, maybe I could be a better father with this, or maybe I could do this differently. Oh, whatever it might be. And some of it may be too personal to share. Some of it is easy to say, oh, nobody's going to care about that. Every occurrence that you have throughout the day could potentially affect someone. There's also something really nice about just getting it down on paper, on your phone, or whatever it is, and just see how you might be able to use it. And by the way, some of that might just be information that you then use when you're on a sales call. And you know what? Hey, what do you think about this? Or what are you looking to do with that? Oh, that reminds me of a time I was having this conversation with blah, blah, blah. And maybe the story works there too. So I think if we're paying attention, Amos, that all these daily occurrences may lead to a book. They may lead to a podcast. They may lead to a sale. They may lead to a blog or a newsletter. You just don't know, but I think you have to be open to it all.
I agree. And I think one thing that I realized this past year was, which again, I feel like I often quote John Maxwell, but that's what I do. I'm a Maxwell team member. But we were at an event and John shared with us, and he said, you know, there's 1,400 of you in this room right now. And if I can raise each one of you 1 inch, think what I've done and the impact that I've made. And it hit me that if you're on television in front of 1 million people, if you can say something or ask a question that raises each one of them 1 inch, you've been so successful. And if you're in a room with 2 and you can raise each one of them a foot, and so it's dependent upon how many you might have in front of you, but the impact you can have is just unbelievable. Yeah. So as we're coming to a close, I like to end by asking all my guests, which it's funny, you do the same thing, but I always like to ask my guests the same set of questions. And the first question is throughout your career, what is the single best piece of advice that you have received?
Okay. I'm going to go with the one that really changed my career, and I want to make sure that I'm able to at least spin it in a way that is not just television or baseball, but I think people will understand the point. My first year in Kansas City was 2008. I'd been in the business long enough. I was a diehard sports fan. Not that I'm not now. I just see things differently analytically. It's work. It's the best work. But I'm not the crazy emotional sports fan that most people are, if you're a sports fan, because it's work. But I get to Kansas City in 2008. I'd come from St. Louis, where I'd covered the St. Louis Cardinals, and they won every year, and the Kansas City Royals lost every single year. And I get pulled aside by our color commentator, who was a former pitcher by the name of Paul Splittorff. And he pulled me aside one night, and he said, "Can I give you some advice?" And he was 25 years older than me or so, my parents' age, I think. And he passed away in 2011, cancer, but a mentor of mine. And he pulls me aside in 2008, and he says after the game, "Can I give you some advice?" I said, "Sure." He said, "You look like you're getting really upset over the losses." I said, "Well, yeah, they're not playing well, and I want to see them win. You know, I was like a fan." And he says, "There are a lot of people that are paid a lot of money to lose sleep over the wins and losses, and you're not one of them." And my first thought was, "Well, you telling me not to care? But I'm supposed to be mad about this." And I came to realize over time that win or lose, and this is where this would apply to everybody else, good day or bad day, we still have a job to do. And we can't always control the results. And we aren't always able to win everything that we do. But I still have a job to tell people about what happened. And I still have a job to find out the information and to be able to get on the camera and provide energy. And so what I learned from that, and it took me a long time to master it, is that, yeah, I want to see our team win every single game, but it doesn't affect the fact that I've got a job to do and a job I'm privileged to do every single day. So I don't have to let the bad times control my energy. And so that's it every single day, is that we're going to get pulled in directions we don't want to go, and we're going to deal with stuff we don't want to do, but we still can always control our energy. And that to me is something that I learned back in 2008 and something that I took with me well after he passed away in 2011, and something that I do every single day that I go to the ballpark. It makes me less of a fan. I love the game, but it's not that I'm less of a fan, it makes me much less emotional, but it keeps me really steady. And over the course of 6 months, it keeps my energy up.
I like it. So the second question, if we could magically get all of the school administrators across the world into one room, and you had just a second to give them one thing that they could do that would change the impact for their students and maybe turn out better, more well-prepared students for life, work, and the world, what would that one thing be? Cater to their needs. I mean, we're hearing that, I know, a lot in education now too, right? When you and I grew up, it was, this is the way it is, and that's it. This is true in business. This is true. Look at, is it better to work from home? Is it better to be in the office? Is it that? And yes, there have to be rules, and yes, there have to be certain regulations. This is when you come to class. This is when you do this. This is when you do that. This is when. But my reporting style is different than the next guy's, and the way this person learns is different from that person. I would just say to listen to your students, to understand what works for them, and understand that everybody's different. Wonderful. Next question: what through your career has maybe been your go-to book that you continually go back to get good insights out of? You know what? I'm gonna go a little bit outside the lines on this one. I don't know if it's outside the lines, but this is less business related, more life related, and it'll be a good opportunity. I wasn't planning on it to promote. Here in Kansas City, we have the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, and for people that aren't familiar with the Negro Leagues, basically this was the highest level, at a similar level to the major leagues, back before Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier. Names like Satchel Paige and Cool Papa Bell, and if you've heard baseball at all, these are pretty legendary names that weren't allowed to play in the major leagues until Jackie broke the color barrier. So the Negro Leagues were formed and began here in Kansas City. I'm actually on the board of directors for the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum,
And a book was written about Buck O'Neill, who was the founder of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, a former player, manager, coach, the first African-American scout in Major League Baseball, and a really inspirational guy that I never actually met. He passed in '06. And Buck O'Neill, there's a writer by the name of Joe Posnanski, who's one of my favorite sports writers. And he wrote a book. He followed Buck O'Neill around for a whole year. Buck O'Neill is one of the most full of life. Go, if you're listening, go Google Buck O'Neill singing, or Buck O'Neill, David Letterman. He was on David Letterman, or he was on the baseball documentary, and just full of life. And Joe Posnanski followed him around for the year. It's called The Soul of Baseball. And it is as much a book about race, about people, about doing the right thing, about perspective, about resilience, about never giving up, about finding the best in every situation. And that's one of those books when I pick it up and read it, and I've read it 3 or 4 times, or even read a chapter, it just gives me that positivity and that just that right perspective to get through the toughest times.
Awesome. And we will be sure to put that one in the show notes as well, along with your books.
Thank you.
Last question. In the ever-changing world of technology today, with everything that's out there, all the gadgets, all the software, the new apps, what is your most useful piece of technology that you are using today?
I mean, the phone obviously is like everybody else, but just to be a little different, I'll say that I've got one of those big giant iPad Pros. And the reason why this one is so important for me, more than my laptop, more than my phone, is that so I keep score for every game. And people say, well, why do you keep score? Well, it enables me to be aware of everything that's gone on in the game. And when we do our post-game show, and I'm not a teleprompter guy, I'm not a script guy, when my producer says to me, and our pregame shows are mapped out, they're formatted, no script, but here's where we're going. Post-game, we get there too, but sometimes we're getting there right in the moment. Something just happened 5 minutes ago. I don't know until we sit down exactly what our post-game show is going to be. If I look at my scorecard, he says, hey, let's talk about the 4 great defensive plays. I've already highlighted those on my scorecard. Here's the thing. I do it all digitally. I have for about 9 years. So I have a PDF of a blank scorecard that goes on my iPad, and I fill it out as the game is going on. Within there, I could flip to the box score, to my scorecard, to a notes page, to a browser. So that iPad, people see me around the stadium. I carry it with me everywhere I go. I could do a show anywhere, anytime with just that iPad while looking up everything and having multiple windows open, even sometimes another game going on if I need to keep an eye on that. So that to me is my go-to technology.
Awesome. Joel, thank you so much for taking time out of your morning to spend with our listeners. I've enjoyed it. I hope maybe we can get you back one in the future when you write book number 3, or even before that. But I think you got another book in you, so we'll be excited to see that come.
I got another one in me. I am taking a sabbatical for however long that lasts, and we'll see if we get back to it. But I'd love to come back. Really enjoy the conversation, Amos.
Awesome. For our listeners, if you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to check out our past episodes. Don't forget to give us 5 stars because that lets us know that you're enjoying it. And don't forget to subscribe so you get alerts when the new episodes come out. Until next time, we appreciate all of you.